let's get to the headlining topic of the show today, Patrick. Our first draft. You got your board ready?
You don't know this about me, but I am the king of spreadsheets.
Oh yeah.
I go crazy with things. And I thought, should I share it with you? Should I not share it with you? I said, no, let's see how much homework Ryan does because I'm ready. I got 17 guys on my board. I don't know how many rounds we're going, but I came prepared just in case.
Well, I think we're drafting 10 all together.
Oh,
So
okay.
five each, because we're looking at essentially forming through our draft a top 10 list of the best shortstops in baseball who are 25 years or younger. One qualifier: are we going to keep the shortstops who are 25 now, but will turn 26 this year? Are we keeping them in the pool?
I think so, right? Because there weren't that.
It's
Well,
like Joey Ortiz, O'Neal Cruz. There's a couple, but I feel like we can keep those guys in there. I think
yeah,
they're
I'm okay with that. Bo Bichette reported to spring training at 25. We can't go out that
he
far.
graduates. He's
He's
26.
off.
He's
Wander
26.
Franco, he's on our restricted list. So
Yes.
we're not going
Yes.
to go that route. And I think
I,
you also put in there
yes.
about Fernando Tatis Jr. You want to slide him in or slide him over? I'm not going to
I,
take him.
what I would say is at the end of this draft, what I'd like to do is have a conversation of where we'd put him above wherever we end up here. So I'll let you make the first pick. I'll give you that honor, mostly because I don't want to pick between a couple of guys here. And even though we talked about a few on a recent episode that did pretty well. So let's hear it. Who's your number one shortstop under the age of 25 right now?
Oh man, I got 3 guys as having that upper echelon, and one of them he doesn't have the same track record. He's still new on the scene. So it's going to go back to the big episode that we just had recently. Is it Bobby Witt or is it Gunnar Henderson? They've got to be 1 and 2. I do have a bit of a man crush on Bobby Witt Jr. And if you ended up getting him and I didn't, I got to go Bobby Witt Jr. There it is. That's my first overall pick.
Okay, so I think it's what is clear to me is you're gonna have a lot of speed with your 5 shortstops, because I have a feeling who number 3 is gonna be here, and it's a guy who has stolen a lot of bases this year, but I cannot steal him from you just to give you both Gunnar and Bobby Witt. Can't do it. So of course Gunnar Henderson has to be my first pick in this draft here.
Yeah, they're just 2 of the most elite players, 23 and 24 years old, respectively, and it's going to be fun. I mean, it's a time capsule. Our conversation that we had recently, because they're gonna be linked together. Like what 2 players at a similar position have been linked for their entire careers for being super elite? I don't know. I don't necessarily
No,
have any that come to mind.
I feel like, especially at this position, it kind of comes in waves, right? Like there was, the Nomar, A-Rod, Jeter class.
And
Just
Ray Ordonez. Come on. Don't forget your boy, Ray Ordonez of the Mets. He was
hey,
linked in that group.
he
He was.
he was the best shortstop defensively, shortstop of that group. But then you have, the most recent crop, the Corey Seager, Francisco Lindor, Carlos Correa. They all kind of came up at the same time. So it does feel like it comes in waves. And I think right now we are seeing another wave of these stud shortstops all coming up at the same time. And we'll find out, just like we've learned, like, oh, Lindor and Seager, probably the best of that last group, just like it was, Jeter and A-Rod that held on the longest. We'll learn in, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, which of these guys ends up with the best careers. But who is number 3, or your number 2 pick, I should say?
In the last episode, I called him Eleanor because I thought maybe that's actually what his name is abbreviated. No, he's actually Elly Antonio De La Cruz. See, you didn't want to do the snake draft. Now you're kicking yourself because you probably want some EDLC, right?
Yeah, that would have made it a little bit better on my end. I'm seeing the fault in my ways. It's literally just lack of execution on myself. I just can't follow it. Maybe with 2 people, it would have been easier. I pick one, you pick, or no, you see. Look, I'm getting lost. I pick one, you pick one, you pick. It's confusing to me.
We've proven that we're not great with numbers when
No,
we're talking. So,
no, we're not.
had things been reversed, and
Yes.
you would have selected first, would you have selected Bobby Witt Jr.?
No, I would have gone Gunnar. I would have gone Gunnar Elly.
I, okay.
I would have. I mean, I would have gone Gunnar over Witt, and then Elly would have been the third for me. So I think these are the top three, and I really do
Yeah.
think that it's Witt, Gunnar, and then Elly. But the crazy thing about Elly De La Cruz is that by the end of the season, we could be having a completely different conversation because athletically, he could just do things on a baseball field that even the most talented shortstops like Witt and Gunnar can't. He's almost kind of it feels to me like he has the power of Gunnar and the speed of Witt, but he doesn't have the consistency of either, if that makes sense to me.
I feel like comparisons are such a huge part of prognosticating and looking into futures. And when Ryan Howard got his two big extensions from the Phillies, once you got to the second one, which was completely unnecessary, if you were to use Baseball Reference at the time, which was going strong at that point, you could have seen that the most similar players for Ryan Howard were guys that did not age well. Another one of your guys, Mo Vaughn, right? And you say, oh, why are you extending this guy out any further? So you can look at those kind of comparisons. And then Aaron Judge, you say there's not a lot of tall guys. Look at Richie Sexton, had a lot of impact early, then faded away. I think Judge is going to be all right. But when I look at Elly De La Cruz and you got a tall shortstop, you think of O'Neal Cruz, and that hasn't really worked out terribly well for O'Neal Cruz. And a lot of that obviously has to do with the big injury last year when we thought he would break out. And so anytime guys are doing things in an extreme way, like pitchers throwing really fast, what happens? They get hurt. They need Tommy John surgery. And you hope that's not the case for Elly. But man, he's been absolutely electric with hitting home runs, stealing every single base. And it's been a pleasure watching him.
We did an article, it's kind of a fantasy article before the season, comparing Elly and O'Neal Cruz and how O'Neal was the better value in fantasy because he was going so much later in drafts. And I read the article by one of our talented writers, Joe Rowan. I was like, yeah, I'm in. I think O'Neal Cruz is going to do it. And he had a great spring. And then the season starts, the lights turn on, and Elly De La Cruz has been far better up to this point. Let's get to my second pick. And I'm between a couple guys. There's one guy that I'm hoping I can get. I'm hoping I can sneak a guy by you. And I think that's why I'm going to avoid taking him. And we'll see if I'm frustrated in a minute. But for me, the guy that I don't want to miss out on is the guy that I do think has a lot of helium that could have a huge ceiling. I think we're starting to see it. That's CJ Abrams. I got CJ Abrams coming in at number 4 on this list.
Yeah, that's solid. I think he is that number 4 guy right now. And a lot of that has to do with the sample size that we've seen this year. But because all of these players we're talking about are 25 years old or younger, and they're in their first or second full season, now we're starting to see how good they possibly can be. They're reaching that potential. For every Bobby Witt Jr. and Gunnar Henderson that immediately out the gate was a rookie of the year caliber type player, there are guys that need to take a little bit longer to get there, or they simply just got called up later on in the year, whether that was their team manipulating their service time or whatnot. Abrams falls into that latter category of a player who, now that he's gotten some of that room to grow and blossom, he very much is. He's the cherry blossom. Is that an official nickname? I think I just gave him that. He's the cherry blossom.
I mean, I know it's their City Connects, and he wears them well. I also want to kind of note on him. If I remember correctly, the Padres sort of rushed him up, and then he gets traded, and at that point on a rebuilding team, so it's like, all right, well, why not play him? I feel like if he was, an Oriole prospect or whoever it might have been, he might have had more time to develop in the minors. So some of that development took place in the big leagues. I mean, he's kind of in like year 3 at this point. I mean, I think he got a lot of run in 2022, if I remember, and then 2023, a full season. Now, though, we're really seeing him tap into that pull side power a lot. So, yeah, he looks like the legit franchise player in Washington, which is pretty great to get. If you're going to trade Juan Soto, maybe, again, that's something we got to talk about at a later date as well, the returns they've got, because it seems pretty strong up to this point. But round out our top 5, who is your third pick in our draft here?
Well, I got a really good sleeper that I'm gonna sit back and wait. I have a feeling, again, don't know how much homework you did, so this is interesting. I want to know what your take is on this. I'm gonna go for my third shortstop, age 25 or younger, Mr. Anthony Volpe.
All right.
What are your
Now,
thoughts? First, tell me, what are you thinking about that?
so I think Volpe is probably the right pick. It's not where I would have gone. If it's my team, the shortstop that I would pick next is a guy that I just like the floor a little bit more. But Anthony Volpe defensively is fantastic. He's got speed. We've seen again a little bit of streakiness this year offensively, but there is definitely offensive upside he can tap into. So I definitely don't think that you're wrong going Volpe here by any stretch.
OPS plus of 109 this season. You know, he's definitely taken that step forward. And that's saying something because last year he's one of only 16 rookies in the history of baseball to have 20 homers and 20 stolen bases. I think that got overlooked a lot from what he was able to do last year because it was mostly the glove and of course, you know, it's being overshadowed, I think, by a lot of the star-studded talent in New York. But he's taken another step forward, not as big as like an Elly De La Cruz or even CJ Abrams, who was no slouch with 18 home runs last year. But I'm happy with Anthony Volpe as my number 3 pick.
I think this is the time in the draft where we have to have a Jackson Holiday conversation because
Oh, okay.
I'm not picking him.
Okay.
But here's my thing about it. Is he a second baseman or is he a shortstop? How do we quantify him? Because I think any prospect head out there would say, like, come on, I'll take the next 10 years of Jackson Holiday over the next 10 years of Anthony Volpe for sure. But we got an Orioles shortstop on this list. And I don't think he's moving from shortstop. So I feel like Jackson Holiday, for the early part of his career, is going to be a second baseman. So that's like this one qualifier I have here. I don't know if we include him or not. I'm not going to say you can't pick him, but I'm not going to. And I'm going to take a guy who showed that he is a really solid baseball player last year and a guy that the Reds are missing a lot. Yes, I am breaking my own rule right when I said it about Elly De La Cruz, but guess what? Matt McLain is a guy that I just can't ignore on this list. He's a better shortstop than Elly De La Cruz. That's the difference for me, where I think Gunnar is probably a better defensive shortstop than Jackson Holiday right now. If the Reds were not trying to sell tickets and everyone was healthy, I feel like Elly would be at third and Matt McLain would be at short. But regardless, give me all of the future stock on Matt McLain. What he did last year was so impressive. He was their best player, really, as a rookie. And when he comes back, I just think he's going to be so solid for a very long time.
See, I know you did your homework because that was going to be my sleeper pick, saying, well, he's on the IL right now. You're going to forget about a guy like that. But I think, you know, going back to what you're saying about the position, I'm probably going to avoid Jackson Holiday right now too, because we know his future is going to be as a second baseman. The rough start gives you a little bit of pause because now he's not this prospect where the sky is the limit. You know what? He's still going to be in the atmosphere here, right? But maybe now it's just a little bit lower because some doubt has crept in. But when McLain gets back, I could very much see him going to shortstop, you know, reprising his role from last season. And then you have De La Cruz going over to third base. Obviously, De La Cruz has got the stronger arm. I mean, no one has a stronger arm than him right now, and in infield or outfield. So, but again, it's about the range factor. So for McLain, yeah, he was great last year, and I don't think he got enough credit in the Rookie of the Year award voting. Granted, it was a stacked Rookie of the Year, you know, a menu of players all in all, but he was absolutely fantastic, and that was a sleeper pick that you just totally took away from me. Can I reward you with the next pick? Because I don't think the gap now between, you know, the players that we select, I'm gonna love my next 2 picks because there's still a ton of really good options, as are you. But just to throw a little snake action in there,
Okay.
can I reward you and say, you know what, you should be able to get the next one. I don't want to be too loaded with me going first every round.
Yeah, I'd love to take the next pick. I'm just stumped on where I'm going here.
All right, so this actually worked out in my favor. Really, what I just did was I threw a
Yeah,
wrench
you
into your
did.
thought process.
Yeah,
So
I was very curious to where you were going to go, and that might have guided me. It's tough because right now I feel like we've gotten a lot of the kind of surefire good big leaguers drafted at this point. You know, O'Neal Cruz I'm looking at because there's a high ceiling. His start this year has me concerned though. Man, it's tough.
he's next up. So I had tiers of players, and I think we agreed tier 1, Bobby Witt Jr., Elly De La Cruz, Gunnar Henderson, and then tier 2, O'Neal Cruz is at the bottom of tier 2, and then I've got 4 players in the third tier. One of them is a prospect. Only one.
All right. You know what? That makes me a little more comfortable going there. So I'll take O'Neal Cruz.
The man who leads the National League in strikeouts. That's who you're going with.
I mean, come on. You led me there, and then you throw that in my face. I mean, come on.
Look, he is still one of the biggest bright spots, I think, for Pittsburgh. When the Pirates came in, it was 2022. He'd just gotten called up, relatively speaking, and there was just nobody on that roster whatsoever. And he was the only player I could recognize, I identified. So I was like, all right, this is the one guy you want to watch take batting practice. You definitely can recognize him from far away because he's just a tall dude. They don't make shortstops that big. So I think that's the right pick here in this spot. Now I got to balance, upside with stability because I think there's two really quality, stable shortstops, both in the National League West, that are under 25 years old. And then I got to see, I don't want to go prospect just yet, but do I believe in Mason Wynn? That's really the question. I think he's the next one up, where how high is his upside going to be? I don't know yet. And he's the youngest of the group at 22, actually, rather. He's tied with Ezekiel Tovar. I think it's really between Mason Wynn for me and Ezekiel Tovar as far as how high their upside can be. I think Tovar has the higher floor because he also was a finalist last year as a rookie for Gold Glove Award. I've gotten to see him play a lot. I think there's some pop in there. He's still young, still developing, but he's getting bigger and bigger each and every year. He can hit. Was above 300 for much of the first month of the season before coming back down a little bit. So there you go. I've talked myself into it. I'm going to take Easy T, Ezekiel Tovar from the Colorado Rockies as my fourth pick.
Yeah, I kind of figured that he'd end up on your team one way or the other. It's an MLB shortstop that's definitely going to be starting for a long time, and I think that gives you an edge in this, where there's a lot of kind of uncertainty as we get to this point here, where again we don't know, some of these guys are going to move off. Like on the surface, I can say, well, I'd rather have Jackson Merrill, but we might not ever see him at shortstop in the big leagues for the Padres. We just don't know. So it is an interesting point here. Here's where I think I'm going to go next, and I might just steal your prospects. Part of me is still like, I feel like we're making a mistake by not having Jackson Holiday somewhere in this, but at the same time, we're saying he's a second baseman. I think this guy will play shortstop. Junior Caminero is my next pick. Did I take the prospect out from under you? Did I?
You did. That was the guy I had there. Dude is tearing it up right now in AAA, OPS over 1,000. And this isn't any kind of Pacific Coast League 1,000 OPS. No, this is international league. This is different.
Yeah, he's a really talented player. I don't know kind of what the holdup is. The Rays have struggled offensively this year. I've kind of been curious to see. I think he might have been a little banged up, if I'm not mistaken, to start. But yeah, I'd imagine he's going to be up sooner rather than later, and he's going to provide them a pretty big lift. I know Ahmed Rosario was playing well to start the year, but yeah, Caminero, to me, there's just so much upside there, and I do believe that he's going to be the Rays shortstop at some point here soon, and should hold on to that position for a while, because that guy on a restricted list, I don't think he's ever coming back.
No, definitely not. All right, so for my final pick, I would love to be cool and just take a prospect just to have that little bit of a swagger, but I'm gonna play it safe. Now, my fourth tier was mostly young prospect guys, and I'm sure we'll get into this in a little bit. Jordan Lawler being injured, obviously is a disappointment. Marco Luciano, I like for the Giants, and I got some other guys down in the minors. But despite my very open crush on Geraldo Perdomo, which I established last October on the PHNX Diamondbacks podcast. I was just so impressed with Jerry P. Just so consistent in the middle of so many of their rallies throughout the entire postseason. I am going to go to St. Louis to go with Mason Wynn. I think, he's going to continue to have some success. I don't know how high that ceiling is going to be exactly. he's putting the ball in play fairly well. 5 stolen bases and 6 opportunities. I think that's going to be solid for him in general. So I think he's going to have some longevity. Whether if he stays at short, which look that cannon that he has is great and is going to make up for any kind of range issues he has. But I think overall he is above average shortstop defensively. So I'm happy with my pick. It's prospect esque.
Yeah.
In terms of Mason Wynn, because I think he still has rookie eligibility for this season, I believe, right? He's close.
Oh, yeah.
That.
I think he does still have it.
Yeah.
For me to close this thing out, Perdomo is a guy that I did not have a crush on last year, and I was always just baffled. Maybe I wasn't watching enough Diamondbacks baseball. It was just always a stat line. I'm like, how is he doing this? And seeing the struggles this year, it makes me kind of look at him and say, all right, well, is he the guy that I thought he was? Who is he? To round this out, I'm not going to pick Perdomo, and I'm looking at all the prospects. Like I know Colson Montgomery has a lot of hype with the White Sox, and we might see him this year. There's a lot of prospects we could look at, but there's a guy who is performing well right now in the big leagues. He's not playing shortstop, but the incumbent shortstop is not going to be there long. He might be there for this year. He might get traded at the deadline, opening up shortstop. I think at some point Joey Ortiz is going to be the starting shortstop in Milwaukee. And I think he's got a really high floor as far as the defense, the ability to hit for a high average, get on base. So we're going to round that out with Joey Ortiz.
Here, I thought you were going to say Mookie Betts and Gavin Lux is moving over to shortstop. But all right, you zigged when I thought you were going to zag there.
Is Gavin Lux still under 25? I guess he might be, right?
You know what? No, I'm going to say he's not. I think he might have just turned 26.
Yeah, 26 in November.
Yeah. The other young prospects I had on my board, Leovor Pagaro for the Pirates is there. And then more on the prospect side of things, Brooks Lee, who's playing really well with the St. Paul Saints. I think Twins fans are going to enjoy watching him pretty soon, and quick path to the majors after being selected in 2022. Marcelo Mayer, he's good numbers, but he's still down in Double-A in an Eastern League that's not terribly hitter friendly. So it's impressive what he's been able to do. And then Colson Montgomery, I think we'll also see in the majors here at some point, because the White Sox have to do something for their fans, right?
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on there. That's a guy that I would think we'll see a lot of in the second half, potentially. I know he's had a good start to his season. Looking at some of the guys in the big leagues like Zach Neto, it's been a rough start, but he's kind of developing in the big leagues. He could have a CJ Abrams-esque rise in a couple of years, but I didn't feel like it was worth taking him. Brian Rocchio. I mean, there was some names here that get left off. Interestingly enough, I was just looking. Royce Lewis is still under 25. He's playing third base now, but that leads me to the guys that have moved off. Let's start at Lewis. With the injuries taken in mind, if you're a GM and you're starting your franchise and you're like, I'm going to get a young shortstop, I'm going to play Royce Lewis at short. Where on this list would you put him? How many of these guys would you take ahead of Royce Lewis? Because offensively, when he's been on the field, I mean, you could argue he's got as high of a ceiling as anyone.
I think a lot of GMs would put him high. And I don't know if it's GM brain where you want to get the best players kind of regardless of their injury track record, because frankly, it's hard to get quality players at any stage of their career, right? So you take that risk. Personally, I wouldn't as a general manager, and it's frankly because I've never been a general manager to actually know that, you get those players, you kind of figure it out, similar to maybe what the Rockies did with Chris Bryant. That has not worked out, of course. But for me, I wouldn't have Royce Lewis, any higher than a fourth round guy. So after Matt McClain, who you took with your second pick with your third pick, the second selection of the third round. So I'd have him maybe number 7 on the list because of the injury concerns for me. But would other GMs maybe put him just right after Elly De La Cruz at number 4 ahead of CJ Abrams? I could see a lot of GMs doing that.
Yeah, I think for me, I'd say right after CJ Abrams. That's because Abrams, I'm not concerned about the health, and I'm starting to see some upside. And the top 3 guys, still at this point, we haven't seen any health issues, and all of them have the upside. I am, I guess, maybe an upside GM that I would take him over Volpe, even though Volpe, you can pretty much pencil in like what, a 4 WAR for a decade potentially. So I do see long term there are safer guys to bet on. And that leads me to the last one that we kind of opened up talking about. Fernando Tatis Jr. was still a shortstop. How high on this list would he be?
Oof, if he was still a shortstop, I mean, I would probably think he'd be ahead of Elly De La Cruz only because he has that track record that's akin to what Bobby Witt Jr. and Gunnar Henderson have now done.
Yeah, I that's where I was looking too, and it's crazy to me. I think what that says a lot about Bobby Witt and Gunnar Henderson,
Yeah.
because Fernando Tatis, I mean, since he's come off of the steroid suspension, the offense hasn't quite been what it was before, and that could be a bunch of different factors. Who knows? The defense in right field has been unbelievable, but that shows you how good those guys have been. Because even in a somewhat diminished state the last couple of years, he's still 120 WRC plus, power, speed, does everything. And Witt and Gunnar, that shows how good they are when it comes to just 25 and under stars in baseball. If we did this and we threw positions out, they're in that J-Rod tier. They're high up there.
When we're having our conversation about Luis Arias and the Padres, and I got to thinking that AJ Preller, it just wouldn't surprise you if they traded one of their quality guys like a Ha-Seong Kim, right? Especially since you've got a lot of shortstops, and you say, kind of doing something like with Milwaukee did when they traded Josh Hader, where they were still able to bring in Taylor Rogers, and you're bringing in two for one, and guys that you can control. It does make me think, with Mookie Betts has been doing, going from the outfield to the infield, if Tatis Jr. isn't just gnawing at his knuckles saying, man, I want to show him that I could do this. I mean, I was just doing this literally, but still I want to do that. And maybe AJ Preller does get creative in that way. With Kim being a free agent after this year, one morning we could just wake up, Kim's on another roster. Padres maybe add a young starter or, a veteran starting presence, maybe bolster their bullpen, something like that. And then all of a sudden, Fernando Tatis Jr. is going to start in today's game. How, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much would that surprise you? 10? Oh my God, there's no way that's going to happen. Or 1? Yeah, no, I actually think it will happen.
I think I'd be like at 5, where it's kind of, I can never discount AJ Preller to do something. What I'm trying to figure out in my head, and I'm doing the math on, is like, okay, what team wants Ha-Seong Kim that's going to give you the pitching? Because any team that wants him for this year isn't going to be willing to give up the pitching. So that's the tougher part of it. But I also wonder, is there a world where Tatis gets traded at some point too? Because I've been thinking about that for a while. How do they hold on these contracts? I don't think you can trade Bogarts. I'm not sure you can trade Machado. He might be the guy that could be moved. But yeah, I thought Kim was going to get dealt in the offseason. I felt like that was an offseason trade. Deal him, get something back, slide Tatis back to short, or you could have put Cronenworth at short or kept Bogarts. I mean, there was a million options they could have gone with. At this point, I think they're holding on to Kim, but I would not be surprised at all if that happened. I'm right in the middle. I guess I would be surprised, but I wouldn't be stunned.
Yeah. No, I think anything is on the table right now with what Preller has done in the past, and who knows what kind of pressure he's getting from, well, not a new ownership group, but a new person leading the charge there in San Diego. So don't know how long his leash is, and we've seen certain GMs when the leash gets short, they act a little aggressive, maybe too much, to possibly save their job. So the Arias trade is by no means a bad trade for San Diego in that capacity, because they're just giving up some prospect depth. That might hurt them in the future, but it's not going to cripple them in the same way as what the White Sox did, acquiring James Shields and giving up Fernando Tatis Jr.
It all comes back full circle to that. That was one of those trades. The Yordan Alvarez trade. There's been a bunch of them that you look back and you just say, wow, how did that happen? But that's because nobody knows with prospects. That's why someone at the bottom of this prospect list in 2 years is going to make us look stupid, because Sebastian Walcott is the best shortstop in baseball for all we know. So here's our top 10. We both drafted our 5. We got Bobby Witt Jr., Gunnar Henderson at 2, Elly De La Cruz at 3, CJ Abrams at 4, Anthony Volpe at 5, Matt McLean at 6, O'Neal Cruz at 7, Ezekiel Tovar at 8, Junior Caminero at, or did I miscount there?
You selected 6 guys, but you know what? I was
Did I?
track. Yeah.
That's what happened there?
Yeah, because he drafted Joey Ortiz because you thought you'd go after me, but I flipped it up on you and I gave you my pick.
I told you before this exercise not to do snake drafts. I'm looking at this. I'm like, I'm at 9. I'm looking at 3 names. Joey Ortiz, our honorable mention.
Yes,
We
yes.
round out our top 10 with Junior Caminero and Mason Wynn. Our top 11. Jeez, I told you not to surprise me with the snake drafts.
So if you were a superhero, your
My kryptonite.
your kryptonite will be snake drafts. Okay,
100%. 100%. Just can't do them.